Here's a tutorial on doing some basic things in FreeCAD. We're going to make a simple postcard holder. First, we make a cube. Let's rename the cube to postcard volume cutter. We're going to use this to cut a slot out of the volume that's going to make up the holder. So a postcard is about 6 inches long by 4 inches wide. So I'm using a formula and say make it a little bit bigger than 6 inches. And the width will be 2 millimeters. Basically, that should fit different weight postcards. And I'm gonna just make this a little bit more than 4 inches. It needs to be high enough to cut a slot. Now notice that even though I put the formulas in, it still says 10 millimeters as a result, even though if you go and go into the formula, you see that the actual result is known. So we have to go up here and see that this object needs recalculation. So we'll just use right-click and use the recalculate menu option. And you notice now that the card has the proper dimensions. So for position, we want to put it about the origin. So move it over half its length and half its width. So we'll use formulas again, and I'm using symbols here so that if we change the width and length, this change with it. I'm going to raise it up 2 millimeters so that the slot is above the bottom of the holder. You'll see that when we get to the end. Now we're going to make another cube, and this is going to be a vertical holder, so we're going to make a window in the holder, and so we're going to make a volume for cutting out that window. So this needs to be inset a little bit from the 6x4 postcard. So we're going to make it 5.5, and we're going to make it 80 millimeters wide. I accidentally put 4 here, but we're going to make it 80 millimeters wide. And it just needs to be 4 inches high. Note I'm using units here so that I don't have to compute the millimeters myself. And we're going to do the same thing to center it on the origin. And it needs to be up so that there's a lip around the card. And I think I'm putting 1/4 inch here, but let's take a look at how it looks. We're really going to just eyeball this. It looks a little low, like the bottom lip would be a little low, so I'm going to raise it up. Instead of using a formula, I'm just going to use the up arrow and add a couple millimeters. Now you can see over on the right there that it looks about balanced between the sides and the bottom. I'm going to rename this cube. I like to use renaming so that if I ever have to delve in, this is tree oriented, and once you do cuts and stuff, They get buried in a tree, and if you ever have to delve into the tree, it's easy to identify what the parts were if you rename them. Now I'm going to select these and hit spacebar to make them invisible. So now we're going to go over to the part design and create an object that will be the volume of the holder. We use the XY plane, and I click OK in this case. We're going to use the first ellipse type in the menu. And I don't know, and we're just going to position an ellipse and roughly position it right now. Go back. I made those invisible because otherwise I wouldn't be able to find the origin, because the two cubes would be in the way. I'm going to name this bottom ellipse. Now I'm going to use spacebar to make the card volume visible. You can see it's perpendicular to the base. I'm going to look at the top view by clicking the little top view button, and I can say, well, that ellipse doesn't look quite right yet. It's too fat. So let's make some adjustments. Notice it doesn't snap to the axes. I don't know if there's a setting or something that I needed to do, but for now we're just eyeballing it. It's good enough. Get this to look about right based on my sense of how I want this thing to look. Okay. Now we're going to make another sketch in here. This will become the top ellipse. And right now we're just going to roughly position an ellipse. And oh, I forgot, I got to turn off that object by using the space bar. Make it invisible. If it was in the way, it would block the origin, and then I wouldn't be able to make it the center of the ellipse coincident with the origin. And we're just going to roughly position it and use spacebar again to make that visible. Give this one a name. Call it top ellipse. And I'd say it looks pretty good. Let's look at the front view. And from the top view again, let's make the window cutter visible so we can see what the top edge is going to look like. And it looks like it has enough volume to it to be printable. Look at it from the side view again. Now we're going to do a trick here. I want to move that sketch up. Here's a little hidden menu. I go in here and I say deactivate. That was on the map mode. I deactivated it. That allows me to use positioning, otherwise these things would be ghosted. And I'm going to raise it by 4 inches plus that 2 millimeters. And you can see now that sketch is up in the air. Now we're going to select the bottom sketch and do an additive loft, and we're going to make it interpolate a volume between the bottom ellipse and the top ellipse. So I clicked add section and selected the top ellipse. It sweeps from the bottom ellipse to the top ellipse. So now we got a volume. And we're going to make everything visible with using spacebar again as an accelerator. We're going to select the body and then Command select the window cutter. And we're going to skip over to the parts workbench and use the Boolean cut. Now it just cut the window out of the volume. Select cut in the postcard cutter. Click cut again. And it cut the card cutter out. Now if we move it around, we can see we've got a holder with a nice little slot and a window in it. Now select Cut 01 so we can export it. And we're going to export it as a .stl file so that we could load it into Cura. I already had it saved out, so I had to replace it. As a bonus, I'm going to show you in Cura what I do to make this thing print fast. So I'm going to select an appropriate profile. I had some changes, but I want to show you how these changes affect things. So you can see I just have default settings for my profile, and it's 10% infill. Let's slice it. Wow, 4 hours and 48 minutes. That's a long time, but that's typical for 3D printing. Let's try 5% infill. Cuts it down by half an hour. But here's a interesting or good feature of Cura. Let's go to the preferences and make use adaptive layers visible in the menu, and scroll down now to experimental, use adaptive layers, turn that on, slice it. Wow, we almost cut a whole hour off of the 5% infill time. So let's save that out to Octoprint, and let's see what happens when we print it. I use Octoprint with my Ultimaker 2 Plus, and I'm using the Octolapse time-lapse recorder. Here it is. And now we can just put in my amazing postcard. And it's a nice little postcard holder. Maybe not useful for most people unless you like to be reminded of your vacations or something your friend sent you. But I think it serves as a good example of certain basic things that you can do in FreeCAD. Thank you for watching to the end.